Good morning, everyone. And now we're taking a look at the wonderful, I'm talking absolutely gems of gems within this. It's a treasure trove of stories and God knows what else from I don't know, this is a website called bustle.com. You might not want to go there, but if you have a little strong stomach to deal with all the blatant female slant on things, you might enjoy it. Who knows? So this is a show I haven't seen called Stranger Things in its third season. And apparently, the monster in Stranger Things 3 is not the actual monster. It's really about toxic masculinity. That's what's causing the problem here. Now, this gentleman is clearly have something going on in his head, and I'm guessing it has to do with the mind flare. Let's see what's going on here. Spoilers ahead, of course. So again, I don't care. I'm not watching this, but you guys might have already seen it. The real monster, though, has nothing to do with the upside down interdimensional beings, or if you're going to play Baldur's Gate 3, or even high school bullies. Instead, it's something much closer to real life, toxic masculinity, and the deep, damaging ways it's embedded into our culture, even on a show as far removed from reality as Stranger Things. Isn't that weird? Well, let's take a look. What is toxic masculinity? I have no idea. Toxic masculinity is thus defined by adherence to traditional male gender roles that restrict the kinds of emotions allowable for boys and men to express. Hence, masculine, including social expectations that men seek to be dominant, the alpha male, and limit their emotional range primarily to expressions of anger. Okay, this is strange. Let's deal with anger. Now, anger, to my definition, is when the universe doesn't think the same way as you. So you're thinking of walking across the room. Okay, you start walking, boom, you stub your toe, you get angry. Why? Because there was something in your way, you weren't expecting that, you didn't see it coming. You didn't know how to react. You reacted emotionally, out of confusion and frustration of why a thing would be in your way. That's anger. It's very simple. Something does not occur the way you expected, and it's a negative thing. And you react negatively to release that emotion. That's all anger is. Now, in this regard, it's as if people are not the alpha male, because the alpha male wouldn't necessarily be angry. He'd just be the alpha male. He'd be confident and strong and be like, whatever. I stubbed my toe. No big deal. Like he's gotten over his anger. He's more concerned about being alpha or strong. Even though it hurts, he's like, I'll walk it off. So it sounds as if someone doesn't understand people who are in pain, or people who are not confident, or people who don't have everything focused in their life, that they express anger, and they call that toxic masculinity. To me, that sounds like a very bad way of categorizing male anger. And there's nothing wrong with being angry and being male. It depends why and how, and whether you're lashing out at someone improperly. That's at best I can understand toxic masculinity. It's not really a thing that exists. It's for these leftist social media feminazi people. Whatever you want to characterize them, I don't really care. But clearly, they've categorized something and done so improperly. If they don't understand masculinity, if they don't understand anger, if they don't understand being confident or an alpha male type. Pretty simple, right? Okay. By now, it feels like a running gag that the women on the show are always aware danger is brewing, but the men ignore them. Well, that's a typical trope in horror mysteries, where it's like someone's crying wolf or the sky is falling like Chicken Little, and no one believes them because it's like, honey, there's no such thing as ghosts. Or, honey, there's no such thing as an invincible murdering dude in the woods, or whatever it is. And if you don't have that, then everyone goes, oh, really? Okay, well, we'll just go along with what you said, and there would be no story. There'd be no stakes. There'd be no suspense. So I don't see how a running, unless this person who is obviously female, Gretchen's male, has never seen a horror mystery before, or B-movie slasher flicks. So you be the judge. So this person knows early on in season 1 that something's not right about someone disappearing, and does Nancy as well. The two women express their suspicions to the police, but are met with skepticism at every turn. Again, nothing new. That's normal. You want to have the plight of the main characters be heightened as the story progresses. This is one way to do it. It works. Including the men they're closest to, so their husbands or their boyfriends, whatever. At one point, Nancy's love life even comes into question, with the police claiming Barb was just jealous about Nancy's relationship with Steve, blah, 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 whatever. So essentially, what this comes down to with toxic masculinity is the men being logical and rational and going, yeah, there's no such thing as mind flayers, honey. Want to play some Baldur's Gate 3 with me? After a lot of valuable time wasted, which is actually what's called suspense, or else you wouldn't have a horror story, the women end up, of course, being correct. And again, just what I do with this is just swap the gender roles. What if it was the men telling the women? Would we call it toxic masculinity or would we call it toxic femininity? I don't know. I would just call it people in a horror story acting appropriately. Like, hey, yeah, there's no such thing as aliens, honey. Stop thinking that way. That's crazy. You know, maybe if they had some evidence, that'd be great. Maybe, who knows? I don't know how these stories work, but okay. They were targeted by the Demogorgon and dragged to the Upside Down, where they were either trapped or killed. Okay, so disappearance. That's a big thing, which increases as time passes. So if someone has disappeared, you say, hey, Mark is gone. What happened to him? I think he was taken by these crazy aliens. You're like, oh, just have a seat there, dear, to calm down. And then after a week, you're like, okay, Mark is gone. We're kind of scared now. So that's a good progression of time in a story where you're building up suspense. Again, nothing about toxic masculinity or being angry or the dominant male or having traditional male gender roles or some nonsense. It's just people going, yeah, he took, I don't know, he walked out of the room. Who knows? He'll be back tomorrow. You would think that because Joyce and Nancy have been right about these sorts of things, the men in their lives would be more inclined to listen to them when they start sounding the alarm in Stranger Things 3. Well, again, if you just have men just agree with everything their wives say, there wouldn't be a story. There has to be a disagreement. There has to be an antagonist there has to be conflict before we get to the real conflict. It's like, hey, this mysterious magical thing exists. And everyone's like, no, it doesn't. But Mark's gone. Yeah, maybe he went for a smoke break for 2 days. It's like, oh, he got lost. It's then the third day and the fourth day, like, okay, maybe something's going on with Mark. Nothing wrong here. And of course, this reads as if this author is like, oh my God, the men still don't believe the women. Like, oh, her language is that way. That's how it feels like. She's like so tired of watching this show. Joyce, whose entire character can be defined as the distraught mother, okay, fine, is the first to realize that something is fishy in Hawkins, and then Nancy. But when they bring their concerns up, they're both disregarded as being and treated as illogical, emotional women. Good. That's what you want. Now let's just imagine that toxic masculinity is real, is a thing, and we're not all just, laughing at this concept. Okay, so this is actually real. Well, guess what? It's in the story. That's what you want. Toxic masculinity is in your story. You're depicting it as such. That is a good thing. You have your male characters. You have people who don't believe other people, who are exhibiting this negative trait. And it's saying, look at how smart the women are. No one's believing them. Why won't they believe them? Toxic masculinity. Perfect. You have told a story with a trait that you dislike, and you're doing it well. You see, this is the problem with these kinds of arguments, is they're arguing for the opposite effect. They're saying, look at this thing that doesn't exist. Isn't it bad? And you're like, yeah, that's called storytelling, honey. That's why you have it in there. Look, there's this male and he's hurting women. Good. You want to show that and show to people that hurting women is bad, so you have a strong person hurting the weak females or whatever. It's like, yes, good. That's the story you're supposed to be telling to show others something is bad. Ooh. Hopper is more focused on the fact that Joyce stood him up than on her troubling findings about the whatever, and Nancy gets laughed out of the office by her bosses because they can't fathom anything useful coming out of her mouth of their young, pretty intern. Yeah, the sky is falling. Who's the new girl? What? Who's trying to eat us? What? A mind flayer. Right. Okay, I'm going to go back to play some D&D now. You go do that secretarial job you're good at. Okay. That sounds perfectly acceptable. And they're low on the corporate totem pole. Yeah, you don't really care what interns have to say or rookies have to say. And of course, all these men are being toxic for being logical and rational and giving the heroine of the story a plight, for giving her conflict. How dare the men do this? Oh dear. Yeah, imagine they all just agreed with her. You know what we should do? Helen, we're going to make a search party for Mark. We're going to stop all of our business. We're going to stop making money, and we're just going to hunt these weird mind flayers you just said down, okay? That wouldn't be a very interesting story. That'd be a very weird story, an unbelievable story, and the story would be over. Everyone would die rather quickly. Then there's the issue of Billy. Came to be the main antagonist, which I assume is the mullet guy in the start. Yeah, it is, okay. Vindictive older brother of Max. We learn early on Billy is abused by his father, both physically and verbally. Okay, so maybe this is closer to what the toxic masculinity represents, and it's personified as Billy. Cool. Again, this is a good thing. You want to show villains as believable and as characters in a story you can like, or at least be attracted to. So in turn, Billy became abusive himself. All right, makes sense. He lost his mom, and the husband took out his aggression, his anger, on Billy. Perfect. I'm liking this show already. When Billy finally wakes up and sacrifices himself to protect Ellen and ostensibly Max, it's hard not to read that as an indictment of his upbringing. Okay, so here we have Billy, who's kind of an anti-hero, if not a villain, and then he gets out of his mind-controlled state, and he becomes a hero. Amazing! This is a great story. You got a character who's toxically masculine, supposedly, who breaks out of his mind control and sacrifices himself for 11, which I'm assuming is a female name. I don't know. And it's not hard to read that as an indictment of his upbringing. No, it's a hero. It's a hero is born moment. Of course, she sees this as, oh, obviously toxic masculinity is bad. If only he was heroic. Yeah, if everyone was perfect. If everyone did not have flaws. What a great story this would be. Yeah, sure, Gretchen. We want heroes to have flaws. We want heroes to be born. We want character development. We want growth. We want climaxes. We want changes to happen. And you can't have changes if everyone is perfect. So if there is such a thing as being toxically masculine, and I don't know, you look like that, make this man a hero. Go for it. That is a great idea. Everything she's saying she hates about this story is what makes this story good. Oh. Had his father not been so toxically masculine and violent, or just angry and abusive, let's be accurate here. Being abusive is a crime, okay? There's no such thing as being toxically masculine in the criminal code. It's possible Billy would have never grown up to be the kind of man who bullies children and tries to lure married women into hotel rooms. He perhaps would never found himself on the road late at night, and the mind flayer would have had to find another host, or maybe none at all. Yeah, there wouldn't be a story if only he wasn't toxically masculine. Thanks, Gretchen. Great writing advice. What all this amounts to is precious wasted time. No, it's called suspense. It's called build-up. It's called having the story run its course. Every time that the men ignored Joyce and Nancy marked another 24 hours, the mind flayer had to possess innocent victims and amass an increasingly large army. That's good. Your threat is becoming stronger and greater, which makes defeating the threat even more heroic and more emotional, more dramatic. Surely 11 would have appreciated fighting a monster had that even 5 less liquefied people. A segment in the final episode says that over 30 dead. Had literally anybody taken the woman more seriously, you wouldn't have a story. What had the journalist, the police, or all their own friends and boyfriends, perhaps the final battle could have been avoided entirely. I don't see. This is the logic I'm not following. She's literally saying, if you take away the conflict, if you take away the characters who not believe the heroines or heroes, then this whole thing wouldn't have happened. And you're just like, yeah, then the writer would be out of a job because no one would watch this piece of crap. It's so ridiculous that this is the argument. If only the men listened to the women, or if only the people who were being logical and rational would suspend their brains and start thinking emotionally and listen to random women talk about aliens from another world trying to eat their brains. If only they did that with no evidence, wow, what a great story we would have never have had. Stranger Things 3 plot, and of course we don't know her definition of the term plot, essentially comes on the backs of women. Actually, let's click on that. What is this? Subverted. Okay, here we're talking about subversions, villain stereotype, and all this other crap. You're like, yeah, okay. I'm sure you're going to be this brilliant literary critic there. Sure. While this feels pretty true to life, sure, being reasonable and logical, it can also make for a frustrating watch. Yeah, because you're a woman and you have these stupid sensibilities and you don't know what storytelling is. As this is now the third time the Duffer Brothers have used, I'm guessing the Duffer Brothers are either characters in the story or writers of the story, I don't know, some form of gender bias or sexism to propel the plot forward. Again, nothing wrong with depicting gender bias or sexism in the story, or even especially the plot. What a great motivation. You have a flawed character who's biased towards men or women, or wants an all-female crew or an all-male crew or whatever. Nothing wrong with that. And it's perfectly acceptable to do that in a story, because that's the point. If you don't like something, talk about it. If you don't want something to happen in reality, write about it. Write a story. Hey, let's write about terrorism. You put terrorists in your story, and they blow stuff up because that's what's bad. So you write about it as opposed to actually being a terrorist or seeing terror. This is how we have values. We have oral and written traditions, and we share them with our children. We say, don't do this. Here's a depiction of someone doing something bad. Don't do that. Ooh. Joyce was the hysterical mother in season 1. Eleven and Max were initially pitted against each other in season 2. All good things. All good conflict. That the Duffer Brothers actually intended to examine how women are treated in season 3 is somewhat doubtful. Again, who knows what their intention was? But there are nonetheless a few positives to take away from it. Nancy gets to quite literally sock her sexist boss in the face. Oh, how bold, how brave, how wonderful for a new hire to punch your boss in the face. Are you kidding me? Let's treat women to punch people. Obviously, it's not teaching women to punch people, but to see that as a form of female empowerment is stupid. Can you imagine a man, a new hire, getting hired by a female boss and punching the female boss? If Nancy does not get fired, or at least have criminal charges pressed against her, or maybe the boss gets eaten by a mind flayer within seconds, and it's like, okay, no consequences for her actions, I guess, because she's a whammon. She has to be strong. She has to punch men in the face. This is a parting message that everyone would be much better off if they just followed the woman's leads. Yeah, assault your boss. What a great message there, Gretchen. Perhaps, why don't you punch your male boss there, Gretchen? Or I'm assuming that Bustle is just a female rag that only women read. But then really the show would be over in 3 episodes. Oh, so she's admitting the entire threads of the story would just be undone if there was no conflict, if there was no actual tension between men and women. My God, it's like she's explaining something which is good to a story, and then she's admitting it. Oh yeah, but if this didn't happen, then the story wouldn't exist. There's this bias that is blocking her brain She can't fathom. This is a hilarious story. I'm more interested in the story of this person writing this blog post than I am about the actual Stranger Things story, just because of how brainwashed she is. And she doesn't need a mind flayer to believe in this feminist nonsense. That's the real tragedy. Reality is stranger than fiction, apparently. Even more significantly, and this is her major point, I guess, this may be building to more women-centric plots in the future, which, if you like women in stories, this is a good thing. And we saw glimpses of with Eleven and Max's friendship. I feel like all the women are starting to take action. Well, obviously, if they're the main characters, I would hope they take action. They have to be persuasive. I think that's a really great theme of this season. I think it will bode well for future seasons and see what that leads. Okay, so actual actors in the story are going, this is good. Women are being empowered. And we're like, yeah, they are. So does that mean Gretchen doesn't like that? I'm not sure. What would Gretchen reactions be? I don't know. Here's to hoping that in those future seasons, the women of Stranger Things will spend less time pleading with men to listen to them and more time simply kicking butt. So there's going to be no interpersonal conflict. It's going to be, hey, women, believe what I have to say. Or, hey, men, believe what I have to say. And they do. And then what? Then you just have like a Buffy the Vampire plot where it's Creature of the Week. I mean, come on, think about that. That would be not what Stranger Things is. So, again, and I just flip the roles or just add more women. If the characters, the main female characters in Stranger Things, start plead with women, and the women don't listen to them because they're being rational and logical, I mean, her whole argument falls apart. Would it be toxic femininity? No, it's just people in a thriller story not believing when someone says the sky is falling. And she's too biased. Gretchen Smale is too biased to figure that out. Because women are being oppressed by the men for not listening to them or some nonsense. Oh, yeah, probably don't go to this website, guys. You're probably not going to like it. But thanks for listening to me rant over how dumb females or femininity are in trying to analyze the plot or setting or setup of a popular show like Stranger Things. Have yourself a great morning, fellows.